Hello, it's Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, if you're watching live, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on, and they will appear here in my chat room, and we can talk directly. And it's the beginning of a new week. It's a beautiful day. And my subject today is happiness. And hello to Bimby in the chat room. It's good to see you, Bimby. There are a number of reasons I decided on this particular subject for today's discussion. But a lot of them come down to weather, which is, on one hand, a remarkably minor issue to bring up the subject of happiness. And yet, it kind of isn't either. And hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee. I'm going to start by simply saying that I think that the concept of happiness that most contemporary people subscribe to, like the concept of normalcy, is probably one of the biggest frauds of the 20th century, and one of the best things to throw out of your way of thinking. And hello to Tina in the chat room. Because for a lot of people, the idea of happiness includes a level of constant perfection. And things are never constantly perfect. They're rarely even momentarily perfect. And if your idea of being happy is being in a constant state of pleasure with no detraction, you're never going to be happy. That isn't going to happen. And hello to Charles in the chat room. It's good to see you, Charles. Hello to Christine in the chat room. And hello to Janet in the chat room. Rather, what I would say to you is that happiness is a state of mind. It's something you choose. And how do you choose it? You choose it by seeing all of the good things around you. And there always are. Are they going to be perfect? No. Are you going to have moments where there's nothing to detract from your perfect happiness? Well, there might be moments, but that's going to be the best. But on ordinary days, it's going to be an ordinary day. There'll be good things, there'll be bad things, there will be the everyday problems we always encounter, and none of these, under normal circumstance, need to detract from your happiness. And yet people so often set such a narrow focus on their personal concept of happiness that it's hard for them ever to be happy. There's always something that isn't quite right. And the truth of the matter is that that's the nature of being. And if you talk to people earlier in history, they would not have expected their concept of happiness, I don't think, to include no things outside of their comfort level, but rather a preponderance of good things. And hello to Zane in the chat room. And I think that we need to get rid of that idea of perfect happiness, which, if you think about it, it makes sense that the powers that be would encourage people to think that way, because since you can't ever achieve that, you'll be constantly chasing it and not actually addressing the things in your life that might really make you happier. It's like marriage. A lot of people now have an idea of marriage of being in a state of constant infatuation and perfect satisfaction, or else it's bad. And historically, everyone knew that every marriage was going to require a certain amount of work, that it would have its good days and its bad days. And hello to Brenda in the chat room. It's good to see you, Brenda. Happiness is the same. It's not going to be perfect, but it's always there if you look for it. It's like beauty. Everything has a level of beauty if you look for it. One of the big social panics that people are trying to provoke at the moment. And by the way, you should always be careful of engineered social panic. But the giant spiders spreading across the United States, the Joro spiders that have actually been here for decades. But if you look at them, they're incredibly beautiful. They're harmless to humans and to most creatures. And they eat a wide range of insects that we have much greater reason to object to. They're actually a wonderful thing when you think about it. But physically, they're exquisite. Their webs are wonderful artistic creations that are natural light catchers. And if you look at them that way, they take on a whole different dynamic. And how you look at something like that depends on what you're looking for. You can look for what might make you afraid of it. You can look for what's good about it. But if you look for what's good about it, you're going to be a lot happier with what you find. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider what might be bad. And with the Jaro spider, they're quite large. If they were dangerous to humans, they would be something to be afraid of. However, we know they're not, and a brief bit of research will tell you that. There are far different types of spiders that you should worry about. You should worry about the brown recluse. It's not at all showy. And in fact, in nature, most commonly, the showier something is, the less dangerous it's likely to be in many cases, because the showiness is to create the illusion of danger to keep things away from it. The things that are really dangerous are often far plainer in their appearance. So, I'm not saying don't have a healthy reverence for spiders. I am saying, when you see something like a Jaro spider, consider the beauty of its appearance. They have wonderful colors. They make magnificent webs. And they will not hurt you under any circumstances that I'm aware of. And yet there are people trying to inflame a general fear about them because of their size and because they can. I think that, a lot of people suffer from arachnophobia, and there is a reason for that. And that reason is that some spiders really can hurt us. But I think if you know the difference, you're in a far better place. Here in Illinois, we have brown recluse spiders. And we also have things like wolf spiders. The wolf spiders are bigger and scarier looking, but far less likely to do you any harm. We also have black widows. One of my most interesting memories years ago, when I was working in downtown Chicago, I would take the bus every morning. And during the winter, I found 2 black widows nesting in my bus stop. And at first, I was quite put off by this. But it was a Chicago winter. It was very cold. And I figured, well, I can see them clearly. There's no place for them to hide, and they're way over there. So I'll just stay on my side of the bus stop, because the bus stops in Chicago are heated during the winter. And you just weren't going to stand on the sidewalk in January in Chicago. And, every day I would come to, or those days that I was working, I would come to the bus stop and I would see the 2 black widows over in their corner. And they never did me any harm whatsoever. And it really changed my attitude in some ways about even the more dangerous spiders. And hello to Maggie in the chat room. It's good to see you, Maggie. And Bimby says, I've found brown recluses to be very sweet. When I see them in the house, I talk to them and tell them to go in my jar, and I take them outside. This is a very important point. I too have found that if you talk to those insects and sometimes other creatures that are in your house that you don't want to be in your house, and you're a magical person particularly, they will listen to you. I was speaking with my niece Sharia last night, and she was talking about a stinging insect I don't remember which one. It was not a wasp, but it was one of them. And she said they were very cooperative because she would simply tell them she wants them to leave and they would. And I found that sometimes that's very effective. They do that. And hello to Mary in the chat room. My son had a black widow as his pet. Its name was Death. And he found it in his place of employment. My son is a thermodynamic engineer. He travels from factory to factory working with the furnaces and the heating systems. And it's not uncommon to find spiders in these factories. It's not uncommon to find black widows. And Death was one of the black widows that he found, and he realized, anyone else would have killed her. He found a comfortable jar for her and took her home. And she became his pet for a good long time. And they had a lovely relationship. He never came to any kind of harm. Of course, he had a proper respect for her and wasn't doing anything stupid with her. And that's the other part of it. But when we talk about life, when we talk about happiness, a lot of people would have just been terrified to see a black widow. And there isn't necessarily a reason to be. Having said that, they deserve your respect. My great aunt Carrie found herself bitten by black widows at one time who had been nesting in her window, and she did not know they were there. And this required significant medical intervention, especially considering it was many years ago. Though that intervention was successful because she knew this had happened immediately. But had it not been treated, it could in fact have been potentially even fatal. But that doesn't mean that every encounter is. And it doesn't mean that life form is bad. There's an old saying in the metaphysical world, you can't blame the tiger for being a tiger. And this is based on the idea that, the tiger hunts in the jungle and eats various little friendly furry creatures that some people would prefer to take home and pet and call George. But it's the tiger's nature to do this, and you can't blame the tiger for following its nature. I'm also very fond of that biblical parable about the lion laying down with the lamb, except my take on it is there's only one case in which the lion lays down with the lamb, and that's when it's eating the lamb. That's the nature of the lion. You can't blame the lion for being as it was created, for being as it has evolved. It's its nature. I once knew a man, very innocent man. I don't know what all was involved in the nature of his innocence, but he was very naive. And he loved nature, and he loved nature programs. And one day, he saw a nature program in which two wildebeests came across an infant lion. The wildebeest knew the nature of the lion, and they stomped the baby lion to death because they knew that otherwise one day it would eat them. The gentleman in question was horrified. It was an existential crisis for him because he had a very Disneyfied attitude toward nature. He thought that all animals were friendly and naturally got along. That's not the nature of nature. It's not the nature of life exactly. But that doesn't mean the wildebeests were bad for doing what they do. It is the nature of their world, the nature of their life. Coming back to happiness, one of the things that I mentioned, the weather was one of the things that brought up this subject to me. And one of the things that I've noticed for years is that every winter here in Illinois, it was different in Florida, where it's pretty much the same year round. Minor differences. But here in Illinois, we have big differences between winter and summer. And every winter, there is a large group of people who complain bitterly about how cold it is and wish it was summer and wish for warm days. And then those very same people, when summer comes, will complain bitterly about how hot it is and wish for cold days and wish that it was winter. And even as a young person, I remember thinking, what? Is there no day that's going to make you happy? Um, my attitude really is that every day is a beautiful day in one way or another, and you'll be so much happier if you find where that beauty is. I remember having a conversation once with a friend of mine. We were driving, and it was a winter day. It was obviously going to snow later in the day, but the sky was so beautiful. The clouds that were preparing for that snow had so many colors in them. And as an artist, it was breathtaking. It was a range of shades of gray and white and gold, a beautiful collection of clouds. And I remarked on how beautiful it was. My friend couldn't see it. All she could see was that it was winter and it was overcast and blah, blah. Um, I feel that I was happier for seeing the beauty of the day. And this is my recommendation to you. Always look for the good around you. Always look for the beauty around you. We want to say hello to Nix60, who says, I also chat to spiders now, but I used to really fear them. We only get false widow spiders here in the UK, but that might cause a bad bite. And, this is a thing. Some spiders can be harmful to people. So I'm not saying ignore that, but don't allow it to overwhelm your reaction. And as Nick says, they have gone from having greatly feared them to chatting with them now. And I've known other people who suffered from arachnophobia and through soul retrieval and other forms of shadow work overcame it and moved on to live without that fear or other similar fears. I had one of my beloved nieces had a deathly fear of clowns, which was resolved through shadow work. I had a friend once who had a deathly fear of drowning, which was resolved through shadow work that involved having encountered her own past life where she drowned and was then able to work through her fear. Um, but with spiders, they can. And Reverend Mary says, I get along with spiders. They eat mosquitoes. Mosquitoes eat me. And this actually is kind of the point. And hello to Eric in the chat room. It's good to see you, Eric. Spiders are actually really helpful to us as humans. For the most part, a few of them are dangerous to us, and we need to be aware of them. But in most areas, it's only one or two that you need to be very, very wary of. As I was saying, in Illinois, we have brown recluse and black widow. The others really aren't such an issue. Not to say that nothing can happen, but those are the two you have to watch. Nix was saying that in their area, it's the false widow, and that while it's not poisonous in quite the same way as the black widow, it can still give a bad bite. And there are a number of them that are not necessarily poisonous, but can give a bad bite. And you want to be aware of those. Of course you want to be aware of those. But you don't want to be bound by that awareness. And I guess that's part of what I'm saying. I say this often in magical practice. I say it right in the beginning of my degree lessons. All of the things in our metaphysical practice are there to help us. They're not there to enslave us. They're not there to bind us. One of the Instagrams I follow is Miriam Ezegui, I believe her name is. And she's an Orthodox Jewish lady who talks about what her life as an Orthodox Jew is like. And she's a very personable individual and does a wonderful job explaining her culture. But one of the things she often remarks, in addition to the fact that practice varies extensively from one Orthodox Jewish community to another, and even from individual to individual in some cases. But the other thing is that they live by their laws, not die by them. And that, I think, is one of the secrets to happiness. When we talk about, for example, I'm about to publish my book of numerology. I recently published my book of astrology. There are more coming. I've written on so many of these different subjects. And, they're there to help you live. They're not there to hold you back. Numerology can help you to understand situations through their numeric vibration. They can help you to understand yourself through your own numeric vibration. But, when you see things that are weaknesses or stumbling blocks, that doesn't mean you must never approach that. It means it's something that you must work with. Same with astrology. If there are certain things in your chart that say that you have certain weaknesses, that means you must address these in order to make them strengths. And yes, of course, in certain circumstances, you may wish to avoid them, but that isn't the only answer. And in metaphysics, when we have an altar full of wonderful altar supplies, that doesn't mean that we can only do magic at that place. If you think that, you do not understand magic. Things like magic wands and aphimes and chalices and all these beautiful things can be very helpful. They certainly are good for your magical mindset, but you don't need them. You never need them. You need nothing external. And if you did, then when you most need your magic, would it be applicable? I love to say that magic is most important when your car is speeding off the road. And you're not going to have any of those things in that moment. And I've been in that situation where something bad was happening in the automobile. I remember once being T-boned in my car. And you had better believe that I immediately used my magic to make that into a much better situation than it might have been. But there were no ritual items there to use. No complex ritual forms would have been possible in the few seconds that were available. But I do believe the magic I did made a difference. This is, I think, also part of what I'm saying about happiness, that so many people want to put so many conditions on their happiness, on what they need in life, and they're not necessary. They obstruct. I was once accused of being the sort of person who, if I were homeless on the beach, would still find a way to be happy. And why that's an accusation, I'm not entirely certain. But yes, I would. It might be the beauty of the sky on a given morning. It might be just making it from day to day. But yes, I would find a way to be happy. I have found a way to be happy through numerous illnesses in my lifetime. I've been walking on a cane on and off since I was 18 years old, and didn't walk especially well before that. I've had a variety of challenges during my life. And hello to Jessica in the chat room. It's good to see you, Jessica. And I've always sought happiness and found it, despite all of those challenges. And I think my message to you, and if there's anything that I say that ever has meaning to you, I think this would be the best thing. That happiness is all around you. You just have to accept it and notice it. I suppose in the opposite order, you have to notice it and accept it, and not block it by focusing on the things that aren't ideal. There will always be things that aren't ideal. They can't hold you back. Edward and I have a saying we've used for years: progress before perfection. We have done things no one else could do. And that saying is part of the reason that was possible. And Reverend Mary says, I love this message. That's wonderful. And hello to Steve in the chat room. And hello to Jazz in the chat room. And Jazz says, I appreciate how Stoicism teaches happiness, which is happiness is a state of mind, and the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Absolutely, Jazz. And that is basically exactly what I'm saying. If you look for happiness, you will find it. If you look for problems, um, you will find that. And the truth is, the nature of this world is full of both things. And now, Christine, and I think we already said hello to Christine, but if not, hello, Christine. Christine says, accepting the things that I cannot change really helps. And yes, this is true. And this is a warm day here in Illinois. And here in my office, it's fairly warm. I've got an air conditioner going. It's still fairly warm. If I let that bother me, I'd be bothered. But I am not letting it bother me because everything I can do is being done. The fan is running, the air conditioner is blowing. It's as cool as it's going to be. And my thought is that I would much rather enjoy the fact that it's cooler here than it is outside than spend my time wishing that it were still cooler yet. And, it's like the famous saying, it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. And Jessica says, this does not mean that we cannot hold each other accountable so that we can elevate each other. Well, that's true. But it also means that you don't necessarily have to wait for everybody else to elevate yourself. We have never lived in a perfect world, and we never will. And yes, we should always work to improve it. Part of the reason we're here, I believe, is to improve this world, to make this world a more spiritual, more divine place. But our own vibration is as high as we make it. And I saw a beautiful thing the other day. Can I remember what it was? It was out of African traditional religion. I cannot remember the exact comparison, but it was comparing two people. And a situation in which there was both good and bad. And one of them could only perceive the bad, the other could only perceive the good because of the difference in where they were as individuals. I think that the more we work to move ourselves forward, the happier we're going to be. And that doesn't mean we ignore the bad things in life. I'm not saying to ignore them. I'm saying not to let them limit you. And Bimby says it's rainy surprise in Portland today. In fact, actually, I think that should probably say, where did it go? Probably should say it's rainy surprise in Portland today. And my thoughts are, now I don't have to water. Exactly. And Nick says, thank you for this. From what you have said, I realize I have found happiness in chatting to spiders. Yes. Or to my cats or my plants. I'm never really alone. And I send gratitude for my life. I love it now. And yes, absolutely. One of the interesting things here in the house that I live with my nephew Jason and his family. And he had a dear dog named Precious. And they would have conversations. He would talk to Precious. She would talk back in dog language, and they understood each other. It was quite remarkable. His mother-in-law was amazed to see this because the dog would understand what he said. But yes, you absolutely can communicate with most other creatures if you develop that skill, if you work with this. Particularly those with whom you have a rapport. This also includes things like trees and plants. When you communicate with your plants, it makes a difference to them. And this has even been shown scientifically to some extent, but metaphysically, we're very much aware. One of the interesting things, Precious, the dog with the conversations, passed away last year. And presently, a new dog has come into the house. And her name is Bella, or as I call her, Puppy. There's Puppy and there's Other Puppy. Other Puppy's name is Ember, but I call her Other Puppy. And Puppy looks almost exactly like Precious, and has exactly the same kind of conversations with Jason that Precious used to have, and displays most of the same behaviors that Precious used to display. And similarly, Ember shows most of the same behaviors of Jules, who was the other dog who passed away earlier this year. And we have no question these are reincarnations of those two same dogs. They behave exactly the same, to the point that one of them is perfectly okay having her nails trimmed and the other one objects. And they're the same ones as before. Ember looks so much like Jules in everything except size. It's amazing. These are both miniature dogs. Jessica says, we're all connected through electromagnetic currents and crystals. I agree. Yes, we're all connected. And I believe that when we acknowledge this, we're much happier in life. And when we seek out the good things, we're going to be happier in life. But many people are trained from childhood to seek out the bad things. And if this is you, I would like to ask you to stop and to start looking for the good things every day. And don't make it a big terrible thing. Just start looking for good things, and you'll find them. Oprah Winfrey used to talk about the gratitude list. And this was the idea that every day you just take a few moments to think of all the things you're grateful for. And no matter how bad your situation, you're going to find there are always things that you're still grateful for, always good things to be grateful for. And when you stop and think about them, they often overwhelm all the bad things that have been occupying your mind. Do that every moment you're alive. You're going to be so much happier. Maggie says, I've always had respect for spiders. They control mosquitoes, roaches, bed bugs, and other disease carriers. And yes, they absolutely do. And but with that, I see that we have come to the end of our half hour. I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to encourage you, as soon as the broadcast ends, to just think about your day and the good things that are there. And you'll find them. And rejoice in them. So with that, let us close with our prayers. We always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do in our lives, and we pray that you will always be with us, even though we know that this is always true. We rejoice in your presence, and we ask you to help us to always be aware of you, and to find all those good things in our life that are constantly there. And as for the bad things, let us find the ways to deal with them and to improve them. And as we go forward in this and future incarnations, let us make this world better and better. Let us make this world more and more beautiful for our presence in it, and not make it worse, as some people do. Help us instead to sow joy and beauty in our wake. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you're always with us from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence, and I will see you tomorrow.